Hey, listen, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Antisocial Podcast. I understand you're probably wondering whose voice this is. So, hello, my name's JB, and I love to write big, heavy riffs with big power metal choruses, and I call it Fierce Deity, which, after you're done here, I invite you to check out. Which you can do by finding me all over social media at Fierce Deity Band, or simply head to fiercedeityband.com. Anyway, enjoy the show.
Well, look who we have here. How you doing? Thank you once again for deciding to click on this podcast and listen to another episode of the Antisocial Podcast. I am absolutely honoured, I'm stoked, I'm humbled by your presence, and it means a hell of a lot. Now, I thought I'd just raise something with you because I've noticed that you're not on my Patreon yet. Now, that's okay. Like, I know that you're just constantly supporting me with, you've subscribed on Apple Podcasts and you've followed the podcast on Spotify. You've gone over to YouTube and subscribed to my channel as well, which is fantastic. I've noticed you sharing my podcast episodes around to all your mates. That's been fantastic. I've noticed all the social media love. You're liking stuff, you're sharing it, you're retweeting it, and sharing on Insta stories and things like that. And it's just absolutely fantastic. I love it. I love it, and it goes a hell of a long way to support this podcast. But go and check out patreon.com/Andy Dowling because support starts from only $1 a month. It's really, it's dirt cheap. You won't even notice it. You just set it up. It's like a set and forget thing, a little feel-good payment. And the more of you that do this, the bigger the impact it's going to have for this podcast. It helps me grow the podcast, expand it. It motivates me to also come up with new ideas to sort of keep all you guys entertained and hold me accountable. And it's amazing. And if you're feeling more generous than $1 a month, I should say, you might even get access to an exclusive Patreon podcast that comes out every Tuesday morning. And that is just filled with wisdom, insight, and just the most amazing pieces of information that I've got to share that I really reserve for people like you who are going to come over and join me on Patreon. So go over to patreon.com/Andy Dowling. Go and check it all out. There's some goals there where I'm trying to reach certain goals to then expand the podcast and do lots of cool and fun things. And if you've got any questions, by all means, hit me up on the socials. Just search for @AndyDowling, or you can go to andydowling.net. Flick me an email, whatever it might be. Happy to field any question that you got. But in the meantime, enjoy this episode. And maybe you can multitask and go to patreon.com/Andy Dowling while you're listening to this fantastic episode coming up. Ahoy, 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 ahoy. Welcome to the Antisocial Podcast. Another week of podcasting, another episode in your ear holes. And, by the way, I've got no idea what episode number this is. I'm recording these way out of whack, all over the shop. It is what it is. But nonetheless, this week's guest is Sophie Christensen. Sophie plays in the Brisbane folk metal band Valhalore, and they've been around for a few years now. And they've done some really good stuff, really quality like folk metal, really, really good stuff. So you can go and check them out by going to valhalore.com, VALHALORE. And I'm sure you don't even need me to spell it out because the name of the band is in the description of this podcast that you're listening to right now. Amazing. Incredible. I'll have links to the band, to Sophie, everything in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. Great chat. Sophie's an absolute legend. And just, stoked to have another fantastic Australian musician on this podcast. So enough waffling on from me. Please enjoy this great chat with Sophie Christensen of Valhalore. So I've got to ask, how did this gig go? Because I'm really curious. There's not many gigs that have been happening around the country over the past few months, and the ones that have been happening have been a little bit unique. And it looks like you guys appeared to have a successful show.
Oh, honestly, it could not have gone better. I had the best time, especially not being able to play shows all year and having a whole bunch of stuff cancelled. Like, obviously, we had our hearts set on going to Varkin this year, which was heartbreaking not to go. But this acoustic show is pretty close to my heart because it's all very, obviously being the only acoustic instrument apart from Lockie's vocals in the band. It was really awesome to sort of strip it all back and just hear it like in its raw version. We rearranged all of our songs, absolutely every single one of our songs, to sort of suit an acoustic setting. which I think people really appreciated when I talked to you afterwards. It wasn't just like we just played them all just stock standard. We did change a few things around because obviously there's a lot of, backing track instrumentation. So yeah, it was really awesome. We ended each show with one of my favorite Irish jigs. And we end with it. We just got faster and faster and faster, and then people sort of lost their minds a little bit. But it was just such a rush. I really enjoyed it.
So before this gig, you guys hadn't really sort of done anything like this as far as an acoustic type show, because if I look at stereotyping your style of music, I mean, this music's primed for like sort of acoustic renditions. So it's interesting that this has probably been the first opportunity you guys have been able to do something like this.
Yeah, well, we haven't had that. We've only been around for like a little while, and we've sort of been really wanting to throw all the heavy stuff in people's face just to sort of grab people's attention. But at the end of last year, we had a show in December where we just had a bit of a party, and because we were headlining that show, we thought we'd throw on a bit of an acoustic set right in the beginning as just as doors were opening, just to see what people thought, because we did put out our acoustic EP. I don't know when it was.
A while ago.
A little while ago. Oh, the years are all blending into one at the moment. But yeah, that was so successful, and we really loved recording it. We're like, oh, we wish we could play more of it. So when we had this opportunity, we're like, well, yeah, we'll throw it on for, half an hour before the first band is supposed to start. And people, like so many people were there and they loved it. And we're like, oh, we should probably do more of this. And unfortunately, because most heavy gigs were cancelled because of the pandemic, we're like, oh, well, let's see if we can try and make something out of a bad situation and put on an acoustic show. And it went so well. We all had such a good time, and, we definitely want to do more of it, because I think there's a really big scope. We do love playing heavy stuff, but we are also folk musicians who just love a good jig. And it's just so happy, and it's so just real. I really like playing acoustic stuff and, all those Irish jigs, and it's never bad. Like, it's always in my favorite keys to play in is in D major and G major, and they're traditional happy keys. You'll find that most it is written in those keys, and it's such a good vibe. I love it. I want to do more of it. We could take it on tour, if things don't work out for the heavy scene for a little while longer. And, if borders do open and stuff again, but, still social distancing and no walls of death, we could always just put on acoustic tours and see what we can make of that. But, yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what else we can do with our acoustic sort of side of Valhalore.
It's pretty cool. I mean, it just gives you an extra sort of layer of versatility where you can adapt and as you said, like if nothing changes or it doesn't change dramatically over the next however many months or over the next year or so, then you're able to sort of try and make the most out of it with this different side of the band, which is cool. Where a lot of other bands, they don't have that flexibility to be able to sort of adjust to that extent, and the music doesn't lend to it. So for you guys to be able to do that, I mean, that's a big sort of glass half full perspective of a bad situation. So it's it's cool.
Yeah, I think we are really lucky in that sense that we do have the versatility to be able to do something a bit different. And yeah, it's really exciting, especially in these times where there isn't that much exciting stuff going on. It's nice to just have that little bit of a little bit of positivity.
Yeah, that's it for sure. And what was the vibe like with the show, I guess, just coming into it, where obviously the last time, no doubt when the last time you went to a show, completely different environment, different set of circumstances, and the world was different. What was the experience like from a musician? Like, negotiating with the venue, all the restrictions, the red tape, and just on the night, like, just what was different about it compared to a gig from last year?
I definitely have to give props to the Bright Side at Brisbane. Their COVID safety plan was amazing, and they were really good to work with. There was no sort of tenseness. Everyone was just sort of really real. I think we were just really excited just to be there and put on a show. I don't know. It was different. we used to, back in the before time, as my father likes to say, before COVID, I don't know, I feel like we just got very sort of we'll just put on another show. Like, venues are very sort of like, we do this all the time. And because there hasn't been a whole lot of stuff since COVID sort of happened, I don't know, it was a different sort of energy. It was more sort of, I don't know, renewed, if that's the right word. Everyone was sort of like really excited to be there. And then as people started to come in, everyone was so excited to be out of the house. And I don't know, it was just all very exciting. Nothing was tense. No one was really stressed because everything was really clear. The bouncers were really nice. If people were standing around the bar for a little bit too long, they'd just be like, "Oh, hi, you do have to go back to your seats now." And they were like, "Oh, yeah, no worries." No one got angry. There were no Karens there. It was very nice. Because we see that lately. All that pops up on my Facebook video feed is just all the Karens.
I'm getting sponsored posts that are popping up in my Facebook feed and Instagram as well of like Karen t-shirts.
Oh my God.
So somebody out there is capitalizing on this and hopefully, I truly mean this, hopefully they're making some good coin from it. Why not?
Why not? Take it and run with it.
Oh, that's it. It's a time to get creative and take whatever opportunity you can possibly get out of this situation. And hopefully the person who's behind it is a musician who's been struggling and they've been impacted negatively by the whole thing, and they've managed to find a little revenue stream from a creative idea, and they're milking it. Fingers crossed.
I really hope so. Yeah, no, a lot of musicians I know have really done it tough this year, and I just really hope that things start to get back to normal sometime soon. Because it's been pretty tough for them. I'm so lucky that I still have my sort of like day job. Because I'm lucky enough to have two passions. So whilst the musician part has sort of taken a bit of a sideline, apart from the acoustic show, my teaching side has still been able to go pretty strong. And we're now an essential person, us teachers, which is nice.
Better late than never.
Oh, look, I'm not going to complain.
Well, I mean, have you? I assume that sort of in the earlier stages when we're all going through that first sort of lockdown and everyone's being impacted and everyone has to sort of escape back into their homes. I assume that for you, like, life would have been, like many of us, Zoom and a lot of remote teaching and trying to. I mean, what grade are you teaching? Is it a multiple grades, or is it one particular grade that you're focusing on?
Yeah, it's really interesting when people ask me about that, because like, "Oh, so what grade do you have this year?" I'm like, "Oh, well, I teach from grade 4 to grade 12. So I've got a wide range. So I teach instrumental music, and specifically specializing in woodwind instruments, so flute, clarinet, saxophone, oboe, and bassoon. And so I have a bunch of students from grade 4 to grade 12, which I teach. And I'm lucky enough to work just at the one school, because in Queensland here, instrumental music teachers are usually they're on a circuit and they go to a whole bunch of different schools. But I'm at a very, very supportive school that really loves the arts and particularly loves instrumental music. So I'm lucky enough to work there for 5 days. And I just go between the two, the high school and the primary school. So when COVID happened, our Wi-Fi really did struggle at school. So I was like, and a lot of my students, because Zoom wasn't widely accepted for younger students, my school did say it was okay. And because a lot of my students were still students of essential workers and they were still there, the school's Wi-Fi system wouldn't actually allow them to access Zoom whilst they were at school. So I made the decision because I didn't want to let my kids then suffer who was having to still go to school. I worked flexible hours to teach those kids outside school. So I worked from home. And some days would start at 7 a.m. and finish 5 hours after, or I'd start at like 12 and I'd go late until the afternoon just to work around whenever my students got home, just to make sure they still got like a lesson, because some of them in grade 4, like, they've just started and it's just such a hard time for them because they've just gotten their instruments and they're so excited. And then this whole thing happened. They haven't even been able to perform. Like my little year 4 band, they haven't been able to play, and their parents haven't seen them play, and they bought a band uniform that they're supposed to wear. And by next year, a lot of them would have grown out of it. So they haven't even got a chance to wear that. So yeah, just anything I could sort of do during that time to give them some sort of musical education. You just do it.
Yeah. It's I mean, obviously, there's that financial impact that families would be having. It's always a big investment to sort of, get your kid committing to something, and then obviously, if the motivation dies off or there's not the opportunity there, then that becomes a bit of a money problem. But I think and sort of what you're describing as well, it's a real mental thing. It's these kids get pumped up and excited, and we're so heavily distracted by so many different things. It's if you're not focusing on something for long enough, then it ends up collecting dust, and you become disinterested, and you focus on other things that might not be as rewarding or as constructive, especially in those earlier ages.
And a lot of my kids, I found, it was the exact opposite. Because they were home, all they did was play their instruments. Oh. And a couple of my students are only child in the family. So when we would have our Zoom sessions, it was able to sort of connect them with all of their sort of like classmates that I haven't been able to see in ages. So like the first sort of 5 minutes would be like, oh, okay, say hello to everybody, and then we'll play.
Get it out of your system, and then we'll move on.
And, that was totally fine, because once they started playing over Zoom, it was a really interesting experience, listening to children play through the internet and trying to watch their fingers. I've never focused so hard on a screen, and you're just sort of like, yep, I think you're doing what you should be doing. Cool.
Have you picked up some additional senses as a result of it, just because you have to focus differently to what you would do in person?
I don't know if senses is the right way that I would describe it, but I know my eyes definitely suffered. But yeah, I think I'm more in tune to. I'm really good at deciphering speech over phone or over FaceTime. I've gotten pretty good at that. As in terms of music, no, but speech, yeah.
And I assume one of the challenges would be just those ever so slight delays in feeds and stream coming through, and just trying to, especially I would assume, would you be doing things in a group setting where people are attempting to play together, or is that just too difficult, just given the logistics of it?
We tried. If we did it in canon, so one person starts and the other one starts like a couple of bars later, it kind of worked. But playing together, no. When we were trying to test it out before we went into isolation, we had 4 professionally trained musicians trying to do it, and we couldn't get it.
Yeah, it's
so let's not bother.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult at times, even just to sort of have conversations, normal sort of video conferencing conversations with latency and just slight delays, and just the flow getting impacted as you're talking as well, and just losing that sort of natural, organic sort of back and forth, and then obviously with music, it's just it's another level of sensitivity again.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Oh, I think it cut out.
Oh, there you go. Are you back?
Yes.
I was like, oh, I hope I said the right thing.
How strange. It just went so quiet.
There you go. Oh, well, you're back there. So
this is exactly what we're talking about. It interrupts the flow.
This is the perfect example of that. But yeah, I assume that it's it's hard enough with talking back and forth, but I think music's got that extra level of sensitivity where it's just the technology is just not quite there yet in a sort of everyday sort of usage anyway.
Especially because of the frequency of the instruments. When I would start playing to try and demonstrate something, and then I'd try and talk straight afterwards, it would mute my voice because it would have clipped from the instrument playing, and then I'd have my kids messaging going, I can't hear you. And I was like, So you'd have to wait a couple of seconds, and then, is it working? Is it working? And they'd be like, yes. And then we could continue. Also, the mute button became my best friend.
Yeah, I've learnt the mute button's an important one, especially. Yeah. There's a lot of background noise, and especially if you've got multiple people all dialing in, then
yes,
it can be awfully distracting.
But no, it was good. We made it work. And then it was nice to sort of be back at school and then to reflect on it, and we all had a bit of a laugh and we're like, okay, now we're back.
How long have you been teaching for, or at least in this capacity?
This is the 5th year.
Yeah. So have you seen people starting out in, say, year 4 and now sort of being in year 9 now, and you've sort of all the way through?
So when I first started them in grade 4, they're in grade 8 this year, and then it's very exciting to see how they've grown musically and physically. Some of them they started off quite small, and now some of them are like 6 foot.
It's scary, isn't it?
And they love to come and stand straight next to me, and they're like, oh, hi. And I'm like, yes, I know, you've grown. Good.
What's the biggest thing you notice with kids starting out with music, and so the biggest hurdles that they've got to overcome?
Organising their time, I found, because life is so busy. A lot of them start out, and it's just, keeping that interest, especially when, they like sport. There's all this assessment that they have to do, family things. If they go to church, it's trying to get the little people to organise, even if it's just 5 minutes of practice. And it's really interesting to see the ones that get it straight away and some of the ones that just need a little bit of assistance. But once they get to high school, if they've been, learning an instrument and doing all this stuff, they're really good they're really good at organising their time, and I feel like that sets them up really well for being able to handle like adult life better. I know it helped me, but I feel like they're better able to articulate how they feel. Like I don't know if it's something about music and just putting you more in touch with your emotions. Us musical people are very emotional. We're an emotional bunch. I just find that there's that little bit more maturity with them than I find when I just walk around the school. I hear some things and I'm like, oh my gosh, I've just got to tune it out. But my kids that I teach just aren't like that. That I don't know. It's just it's a very different, level of just maturity, just emotional maturity. I find, especially with the ones that I've gone through all the way from year 4 to now like grade 8, grade 9. It's really interesting to see how they've sort of grown as humans.
So my sort of comparison growing up is, I think, it must have been year 4. It must have been year 3 or year 4, and I picked up the trumpet. Mm-hmm. I actually wanted to play saxophone, but the school didn't have any, and then so it meant that we would have to buy one, and my parents were like, geez, like...
Saxophones are expensive.
That's a big price point. We might have to look at a substitute. So the music teacher said, "Oh, we've got a couple of trumpets here at school." So I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll do trumpet." and I like just what you said there. Absolutely, I think the biggest things that I learnt initially was just the additional commitment and the discipline that's not there in the classroom traditionally. And I think you're highly accountable because it's focused on you as an individual, not in a larger class where you can sort of fade into the background and sort of be forgotten about and fly under the radar. And you have to be quite vulnerable as well because you're forced to have to perform. You're creating something. You're being sort of creative and with this music and trying to create noise. And it's if you're not used to that, which you're not at that age, it's really sort of putting yourself outside your comfort zone. So I think you sort of learn lots of really unexpected skills just as a sort of a natural sort of reaction to sort of going through those earlier stages of just getting used to playing an instrument, especially at school.
Yeah, 100%. And the little people when they're in grade 4 and the groups that they're in and the band they're in, I find that like the school that I'm at, it's a really big school. There's over 3,000 students at this school. It gives them sort of like a home base, somewhere where they belong. They have like a team, like a little tribe, and the friends that they made from their little instrumental music lessons, I still see over on the high school, and it sort of gives them just somewhere where they can always come. Like like every day that I'm over there, there'll be kids practicing at lunchtime, and that's just what they do. And that's where they feel, that's where they feel that they can come, and it's their space. And I find that it really helps them, just it's their happy place.
What's motivating kids to go down a particular path of picking a particular family of instruments or a particular instrument itself? Do you see that sort of in the last few years of you teaching that the interest levels change depending on what's going on around them? Is it something that the family is sort of picking on behalf of the child? Like how does that work, and what do you notice?
Well, what we do when we start in year 4, but in year 3 we start the sort of musical aptitude testing, and from there we send them out a little checklist of whether they like to play the clarinet or the saxophone or percussion. We make sure when we say, "Would you like to play percussion?" it's not just drums. There's also a triangle. You got to learn how to play that. That sort of stuff. And we send out a video, especially this year due to COVID. We usually have a sort of parent info night and we go through all the different instruments. But this year we had to film ourselves talking about each of our instruments. Oh, that took so long. There were many a typos and many a swear word, and Lachlan and Anthony had a good old laugh listening to me to try and talk through all my different instruments. I think one time when I was talking about the flute, I said, "Now it's really good to have hands."
Yeah,
but yes, like you,
correct.
I also wanted to play the saxophone.
Yep.
Because Lisa Simpson played the saxophone.
Ah, yep.
But my music teacher at the time was like, "Oh, show me your hands. You have really good clarinet fingers." Which now that I'm a music teacher, I know is bullshit. There is no such thing as having clarinet fingers. They just had too many saxophones and wanted a clarinet.
Oh, that's so funny.
Which is fine, because it worked out fine in the end. Like, I actually really liked the instrument that I was given, but don't lie.
Well, I was a chubby little kid, sort of growing up, and so there was a couple of comments along the way saying that I would have really good lungs to be able to play the trumpet. And
did you talk a lot at school?
Oh yeah, I was a bit of a gas bag, but and those chubby little cheeks, they're good for blowing into a trumpet. So I was like,
yes,
right, okay, fair enough. There you go. So it was whatever influence you can get over the person to pick their chosen instrument. But it's interesting. Obviously,
that personality, I would choose saxophone for you as well, because usually if I've got a bit of a boisterous child in front of me, I'm like, "Oh, you could suit saxophone."
Yeah.
So you definitely lucked out there.
There you go. Well, I always had this sort of fantasy in the back of my head that one day I'll just randomly come across a secondhand saxophone that will just be, and I'll have money to waste, and I'll just buy it, and I'll become a saxophone sensation. So
look, you'll never regret it. It's a fantastic instrument to learn.
There you go. So with teaching, do you find that the skills that you've developed sort of teaching and sort of being ultra patient with kids, that sort of translates into the band as well? Do you find yourself sort of, almost taking on a similar role with the rest of the guys as far as talking about sort of things and directing, or sort of coaching people through sort of different situations and getting people on board?
Yeah. If any of them will listen to this later, it's a really loaded question.
All right, okay, you go for it.
No, it's funny, every now and again, Lachlan and Anthony will have their, discussions, and I'll be like, "Oh, but see it from this point of view," or, "This is probably how he was feeling when he said this." Or like whenever we're having a rehearsal and, someone's just, twiddling away trying to play their part, and I'm like, "Hey, like, this is a rehearsal. Let's all play together. You can practice in your own time." Apart from that, I try not to use, I try not to slip into teacher mode and just stick in rehearsal mode. But, I'm a stickler for, being very efficient with my rehearsal time. So let's channel play, especially towards the acoustic show, because I was like, we have to do well, and we have to play so well because it's been so long and people deserve a good show.
Going back to the teaching a little bit, where was the motivation to go into teaching? Do you have family that are teachers? Have you got a long sort of lineage of teaching relatives sort of in your family that have inspired you to go down this path?
No, not at all. No one in my family. Well, my dad sort of does a little bit of teaching here and there, like he does lectures, and he's a wildlife officer. And he goes out and teaches people about legislation and stuff like that. But in terms of like actual teachers, no one in my family for like ever. And I never actually planned on being a teacher, being absolutely honest. It sort of came out of the blue. I was studying at the conservatorium. I wanted to be a classical clarinet player.
Wow.
And travel the world, do all that stuff, playing musicals, get a fellowship with an orchestra. But in the last year of my degree, my jaw just decided not to play the game anymore. It's called a temporomandibular joint. It's the sort of joint that sort of connects your jaw to your skull.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, TMJ for short.
Oh.
It's sort of like permanently displaced itself.
Right.
So yeah, I went to see a physio, and to say it exactly as he did, he felt my jaw and said, "What the fuck have you done?" And I was like, "Oh, cool, thanks, man. Can you fix me?" And he said, "No, I can't." So I then had to think really, really quickly about how I wanted to continue. And I met with one of my lecturers, and she was teaching a couple of teaching subjects at the time. And she was like, "Oh, well, how about we switch some of your performance subjects into, pedagogy subjects," which was their teaching sort of line. And I was like, "Oh, okay. All right, we'll give it a go. Gotta finish this degree somehow." And I went to an all boys school, and they did their first beginner band day. And when they start their kids, they have a whole day of music, and they hand them their instruments. They teach them their first couple of notes, and then they just get stuck straight into band. And by the end of the day, they can pretty much play a whole song. And that day in itself completely changed my life. Really, I was like, "Oh, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do." It was like this really cool, like, eye-opener. I was like, so this is what I was put on the world to do. I really like teaching. Who would have thought? Because I never, ever, ever wanted to do teaching. It was like the last thing on my mind. And then I was sort of, I don't know, I was forced into it, but then I really, really liked it.
Just going back to the condition with your jaw, was that as a result of just what you put your body through, sort of going through your degree and everything, or is this something that's probably pre-existing that has flared up or become a problem?
We don't know. Every specialist that I've spoken to, there hasn't been enough research done on this particular joint. All the stuff is sort of fairly new. It's I found to be pretty common with clarinet or saxophone players. I've spoken to quite a few people now that have issues with their jaw. And as I was talking to my physio, he pointed out to me something that's very straightforward. We've only been playing musical instruments for, a couple of 100 years. Our bodies aren't actually designed to play these sort of instruments for a really long period of time. And when I think back to, like, I would practice for, 6-7 hours a day back when I was doing my degree. And whether it was a predisposed like weakness or, just, hours and hours of practicing, and it just, I wasn't meant to play the clarinet for a long period of time, even though I really it's my favorite instrument. I love it. I think it's so beautiful, and I still wish I could play it as well as what I could. But unfortunately, my body said no. And my dad has always loved Celtic music. And one Christmas, he just got me a tin whistle, and he's like, "Oh, I thought you'd like this. Here you go." And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." And then slowly but surely, because, the tin whistle doesn't take any jaw pressure. It just, it literally just have to, your nose could power it. It's a small little thing. I wouldn't recommend sticking a whistle up your nose though. Don't do that.
Oh, thanks for letting me know. I was considering it then.
I have seen it done. There are videos. But yeah, it's not as physically taxing as playing a clarinet. So I switched, and it's been pretty cool. I've been able to do some pretty cool things from it. So even though it was it was a pretty tough time to start off that whole process, being told, the thing that you've worked on since high school and the whole way through uni, and studying a music degree is not one of the easiest things in the world. To almost be finished it and then to be told that no, that's not going to happen, I was like, but teaching saved that for me, and I really love it. There's no better. I can be so tired, and I can just be like hating wanting to go to work and be like, no. But once I get there, once I'm in front of my band, no one would tell otherwise. They'd be like, oh yeah, cool. She's had like 12 hours sleep. She's so ready to go. It's awesome. And I just really like, all my kids have got such cool personalities. And it's just really fun seeing them. Like as soon as they learn a new note and they're so excited about it, I'm like, yay, I'm excited too. And then, I still get to do the performing thing with the band. So, I haven't lost anything. If anything, I've gained two awesome worlds, the teaching world and then the world of Valhalore.
It must, I think you articulate it better than me sort of coming back around to it, but it must have been just such a massive weight off your shoulders to be there on that day and sort of experience sort of just what the possibilities could be. And as you said, like just really understanding, wow, this is what I want to do, especially not sort of really knowing for sure whether, I assume going into that day in particular, not really knowing for sure what the long term is going to be for yourself. But because a lot of people, they never know what they're going to do. Like, even for me, years down the track, there's lots of things I like doing, but I've still every once in a while go, oh, what am I actually doing? Where do I want to go? What's my purpose in life? And but a lot of people do find their spot and their big why behind what they want to do. And it's exciting to hear somebody else sort of discover that, and as early as you have, which is good.
Yeah, no, I am really lucky. And what could have been like a pretty awful situation actually turned out to be probably one of the best things. So, like everything does happen for a reason. And clearly that was the reason, that I was supposed to, change my degree and do teaching.
With your experiences of, you mentioned before about sort of playing 6-7 hours a day and whether that contributed to some of the problems that you had, don't know for sure. But I guess when you've got young kids and the more enthusiastic ones who decide to, obviously they've got to go to school, so it's not always a big problem. But if they're sort of, really sort of engrossing themselves in their instrument and spending long periods of time on it, are those sort of discussions taking place around, a little bit of care as far as, even
100%.
Even holding their, the correct positioning and the right habits to begin with as well, so you don't develop muscle issues and all that sort of stuff?
Oh, yes, I am a stickler for technique. Every day we go through, proper technique, the way that we need to hold our instrument, even the warm-ups that we need to do before we play, and, different jaw exercises and hand exercises. Yeah, no, I'm the one thing that I will make sure is that, if my kids do want to go down that path of, being a musician and going and studying at a tertiary level, at least I know that they'll have the tools to make sure that they can do it properly. Because professional athletes, they spend ages warming up and, making sure that their muscles are all ready so that they can go and run. Like they'll get on the bike and they'll make sure that, their heart rate's up before they go and do those sort of things. Like, musicians, professional musicians need to do the same thing. They need to make sure that their muscles, ready to go. It's not the same sort of level of exertion, but you're still using those muscles at such a high level for a long period of time. So we need to sort of treat our body the same way.
What sort of things is it a consistent thing, regardless of the type of instrument? Obviously it's the same family of instruments that you're teaching, but is the clarinet to the saxophone or whatever it might be, are there different types of warm-up techniques depending on the instrument?
Look, with woodwind instruments, the main sort of staple thing is just lots of long sounds just to really get your air going to start off with. But in terms of your body, it is totally different for each instrument. The clarinet itself takes quite a lot of jaw pressure. So I'd make sure that all of my kids have like really like relaxed jaw muscles, and that they make sure they take breaks and they reset their jaw. For flute players, there's a lot of pressure on their arms. Bassoon and oboe players, especially oboe players, there's a lot of back pressure. So it's just making sure they give themselves enough time to actually breathe out. And then, the bassoon is quite heavy. It's quite an awkward instrument. So just making sure that particularly their left arm is really nice and prepped, because even though it doesn't seem like super heavy, after a little while, after holding something for a long period of time, they do get quite heavy and quite strenuous, especially when that's the last thing that you really want to be concentrating on. You want to be concentrating on the music and playing it to the best of your ability. You don't want to be focusing on, oh, my forearm's really hurting, oh.
I've just had a flashback to primary school where we'd have like a physical education class, and we'd all stand there with our arms stretched out, sort of neck, like, up and stretched out, and not holding anything, but just keeping them out stretched and just seeing who would be the last one standing. And, it's just your own weight. And so you're not holding anything. So you think, oh, this is a piece of piss. It's easy as. But then over time, your arms just become like these super heavy things, and it's just all your might just trying to keep your arms up. So just what you said before about with some of these instruments, when you just hold them for initially, they're quite light, but if you're playing for a long period of time, I mean, I could see all sorts of muscle issues that could flare up over time, and other physical problems that could happen, especially if your technique's not crash hot to begin with.
Yeah, and that's for all instruments. Like, I know plenty of guitarists as well that, the whole RSI and the carpal tunnel, like from having your wrist in like one particular spot especially if you're tense. Musicians can run into a whole bunch of issues. So I think it's really important that we all take care of our bodies, because we don't want to have to, stop playing the instruments that we love just because of, something that we, hopefully can avoid through just warming up and making sure that, we're ready to go.
Do you have sort of instances of having new kids sort of join these lessons who have come from other schools and maybe have had some prior experience, and so they're not sort of coming sort of fresh in with no prior experience? They've probably already been playing their instrument for a couple of years, and you're sort of having to pick up where they've left off. Do you have those sort of scenarios, and do you see like sort of bad habits that you've got to try and correct and get them sort of up to a different standard?
Yeah, look, that actually happens all the time, especially at the start of each year or at the start of like a semester. Students will come from far and wide, and you can definitely see whether, especially for woodwind, whether a woodwind specialist has started them off, or whether it's been someone who's played the trumpet or the trombone. Kids will come at various different stages, and if they have a few technical issues, we'll try and address that as nicely as we sort of can, because obviously they're just at a new school, so you don't want to be like, oh, this is wrong and this is wrong, and they've obviously built up a relationship with that teacher, so you don't want to sort of get off on the wrong foot by being like, oh, your teacher did this wrong, because you want to sort of, I don't know, come across as caring, and you don't want to just sort of shit all over that teacher that they've obviously had a really deep connection with for, however many years that they've been at that previous school. So it's just like small steps. It happens all the time, and I'll have children that'll come to me and they'll have a few little issues, but we'll just work on it slowly. The main thing when they come to a new school is just trying to get them to just settle in and just feel comfortable. And then once they feel comfy, then we'll start sort of working on any like issues that they have. But you can't work on those issues unless you have sort of their trust first. So that's first and foremost what I want to, sort of build with that child first.
You must have such a high level of patience to deal with these kids. I mean, even the well-behaved ones, as you said, like you've got to build trust with them. It's a long game. It's not sort of getting immediate results, and you've got to get their buy-in, especially I mean, I just know how I was as a kid. And I mean, I was an absolute, like, just to try and have any focus was a mission. So, I mean, yeah, I assume, am I wrong? Like, you must have a fair bit of patience sort of ingrained in you to be able to sort of really do a good job.
Yeah, look, I would say that at school I'm pretty patient. Sometimes, look, my husband and my housemate would say that sometimes I use up all my patience at school and then I get home and I'm grumpy. But yeah, no, the patience level has definitely been built up over the years. I feel like it's definitely something that it has to develop, and especially if you want to be a teacher, you do definitely have to have that patience. Otherwise, it can just be so frustrating. And it's not their fault. They're small and their brains are small and they're still like learning how to be a human. So you just have to be. If you want things to work, you just have to be patient.
One of the things I find really interesting is that I think a lot of musicians have a hesitation to talk about sort of different parts of their lives. And I think it comes from the old school stereotypical sort of rock star sort of persona of, this is my life and I'm sort of this full-time musician and not, tour the world and record labels and all that stuff. And that's a very sort of dated sort of concept to what it is now. But I mean, for you, and just listening to the way that you talk about everything, and obviously you're quite passionate about teaching and these different lives that you get a lot of fulfillment out of. I can't stress enough, like, to a lot of people that I talk to that are musicians, to really embrace every aspect of their life. Like, they can be multi-dimensional in what they enjoy doing. And I just feel that some people really sort of hide the other elements of their life, maybe the more normal aspects of their life. Have you ever sort of, like, with the band and the success, I mean, you guys have done really well in such a short space of time. I mean, you've had so many great opportunities and you've got more opportunities on the way as well. Have you ever sort of hesitated about sort of sharing this stuff in the past and going, oh, do I sort of keep this stuff private? Do I blend the worlds together? Does that sort of ever come into mind?
I constantly think about, the blending of the two worlds. And outside of the school world, I'm very open about, my favorite thing is, like, I teach by day and I gig by night. And some of my friends' parents is like, oh, you're like this, like, just really like normal person. And then you have like your alter ego. And I've really sort of tried to take that alter ego side on board. So almost when, like, we play gigs, it's like I'm a whole different person. But when I'm at school, I do tend to keep the whole band side a bit separate, because I do hold myself at a really high standard without trying to come across as a bit of a, but yeah, when I'm at school, I'm very professional. Only some of my seniors, once they get to high school, do I oh, I know I've got this gig and, I won't be here because I'm in Melbourne or I'm in Sydney, obviously not this year, but previous years. And it's not like that I don't want them to know that I'm in a band. Like, it's not like we're, none of our songs have swear words, but it's just, I just wanted them to see me in a particular light before they get to like grade 11, grade 12. And then once they're there, I'm like, oh, well, it's more just sort of like a collaboration type relationship. It's sort of fine for them to know then. But apart from that, yeah, I'm very open about both sort of aspects of my life. And obviously, on social media and stuff, I'm always posting different things like, oh, look, my band at school did this. Oh, look, my band outside of school did this.
I think it's just refreshing, and I see more people doing it, but I think it might be a generation thing as well. I think, it was always a case of, you had your traditional job, and then whatever you did outside of your job was, private or as a hobby or something that you didn't take seriously. And so there was
that word hobby.
Yeah,
hobby.
Yeah. And I think that stigma around it carries a lot of weight. And I think psychologically people sort of go, I can't let each world know about each other.
Yeah, it's like the rock and roll sort of lifestyle, as opposed to the sort of suburban, sort of more chill, average lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think people also get paranoid that, if a fan of your band discovers that you've got a day job or something that's very traditional, it's like, oh, they're not as exciting as what I thought they'd be. And I mean, maybe if I was younger and I was first getting into music, you always sort of had this sort of, the mystery is exciting and sort of adds to the whole experience of getting into music and all these larger than life characters. But I mean, maybe it's just I'm getting older now, so I sort of appreciate all the additional layers to a person. But I don't know. I think we're all forced to have to live really sort of blended lives now. We've got to blend everything together. We are our own sort of entity. So we come as one package, not as separate packages, depending on the audience.
Yeah, I totally agree with the age thing. I feel like when I first joined the band, not that it was that long ago, but I think I kept things a bit more separate when I first joined. But now that as I'm older and I appreciate the whole sort of like just being real, like we don't need to pretend to be someone. We just need to just exist. Like it doesn't matter that you have a day job. It's not like you're not living that rock star lifestyle if you're just, you're living week to week, you're eating 2-minute noodles. Like you can still have a day job and then, go play Varkin and it's totally fine.
I remember when I first moved to Sydney, because I'm originally from up your way, and I lived in the inner west and it was fantastic. Lots of musos lived in the area and a real fun time. But there was guys I knew, and absolute legends, like really nice guys, but they would deliberately live in sort of this slum scenario because they wanted to be like early 80s Motley Crue or early 80s, or mid 80s Guns N' Roses where, they had the 2-minute noodles and, their diet was just cheap booze and, a really poor diet and limited sleep and just partying all the time because that was the image that they wanted to create. They wanted people to see them like that. That was that romantic sort of image of being, the rocker, the rock star or whatever it might be. And look, more power to you if you end up becoming successful as a result of doing that. But most of us don't. And it's just not sustainable. I mean, healthy, like from a health point of view and physically and mentally, just so many things. And I see now in the last, I don't know how many years, but in the last few years, so many, like it's almost like the next wave of bands that are coming through and musicians don't really give a shit about that sort of stuff. And it's not really that important. And so now it's a case of how can I be more skilled? How can I be sort of even a little bit, and I hate the word, entrepreneurial in a way. Like
you're exactly right there.
Yeah, and it's a little bit more, that's exciting instead of like the boozy sort of sex, drugs and rock and roll stuff from probably a generation earlier.
I mean, it did work for Motley Crue, and I love the movie on Netflix, The Dirt. I've watched it. I can't, I'm embarrassed to say how many times I've watched that movie, but they definitely had their troubles, and whether they just tried to live that rock and roll lifestyle because that's just what they thought they had to do. But I watched recently the Parkway Drive movie, and I give so many props to them. I think they're amazing. And watching that movie, it was just so inspiring because, they have day jobs. That's what they do that. And then they also took that big risk and they just went overseas and they did the band thing and it really worked for them, but they made sure that they had a fallback plan as well.
I think it's it's smashing the stereotypes and I mean, I love it. I love sort of, even for me as, I sort of get older and I sort of, forced out of, society norms to sort of become a little bit more mature in my actions and the things that I do, that it's far more accepted now than it probably was, 10 or 15 years ago where, people would sort of, shun away any sort of, don't reveal that part of your life because no one wants to know that you're a plumber or you're a forklift driver or you're a
school teacher.
Yeah, or whatever it might be. And it's like, it's just it's a normal thing, So, it's cool. It's just, and I love to listen to people, especially when they're really passionate about their job as well, like their career. Like it's something that they're sort of showing people that, yeah, you can. It's exactly what my parents told me when I was a kid. It's like, you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. Have a plan B. Do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, stuff that. I want to be a Metallica.
It's like, damn, they were right.
Yeah. Oh, my mum would just be going, yep, told you so.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not like Anthony and I, we built our house last year. So, we're like just, general suburban people with a mortgage, but, we still have that dream of living that rock star lifestyle. And hopefully, once things get a bit more normal, we can do that. And it's really exciting. But we know that we always have we have our home, but that doesn't mean that we can't go off and, travel the world and doing the music thing. Like, there is nothing cooler. Like, it's my favorite moment we have a particular song, Augury of Death, and every time we play the song, we know that there's going to be a wall of death, no matter if there's like 4 people in the crowd, like Lucas and Anthony will both get down there and they will add 2 other people to this 4-man wall of death. And it's just, there's no better feeling than watching them do that. And, I'll still, go back to my job at the end of the day and, teach the kids, but I'll know that, the next tour is, just around the corner, and there's no reason why we can't do both. Just, you make it work.
That's it. It can coexist. It doesn't have to be one or the other. You don't have to throw away every other aspect of your life just to dive in and do it. I mean, some people do, and they do a great job of it, but it's not the only way. There's not just one path. There's lots of different paths. Everyone's got their own version of what success looks like, and that's cool. I mean, I assume that sort of the long-term vision of the band is to sort of have that coexisting life where you all individually can live the way that you want to live and focus on the things that you're passionate about, but also still have this really sort of pumping band that gets to go off and have these adventures every year.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic idea, and I'm really looking forward to, once things sort of get back to normal. We've got a whole bunch of really exciting things in the works, so I'm really hoping that we can do those things and, live the life.
You I think I saw, I don't know how long ago. It wasn't that long ago, but there were some tour dates announced for next year in Europe.
Yes.
So is that sort of this is something, and I appreciate that you might not be able to go into too much detail about it, but just given the circumstances of everything that's going on and the unpredictability of next year, is it a case of sort of just playing it by ear, but also sort of having this sort of moment in time where it's sort of going, well, we've got to sort of make a decision as to whether this is actually going to be a thing or whether we need to sort of relook at the schedule again and make adjustments?
Yeah, look, it's touch and go. Like, it changes day to day. Obviously, ideally we would love to be over there. Everything at the moment is running like we will get over there, but things change. Like, just before we did our acoustic show, there was an outbreak and there was a chance that the gig itself was going to be cancelled, but because the venue had such a good COVID plan, we were still able to go through. But look, things are still being planned. We're still locking things in as though it's going to happen. But we're just going to make sure that we keep up to date with all the recent events and just make sure that we stay informed of what's going on, so we can do the right thing by us and the people who are organising the tour overseas. We want to just make sure that we're very just politically correct with everything that we're doing. And I know that the government's very limited with how many people can go overseas, so we just want to make sure we do the right thing by everybody and the right thing by ourselves. So look, it'd be fantastic to still get over there, but we'll see what happens. We won't be able to really make a decision until, things sort of become a bit more clear. So at the moment, we're just sort of in this limbo land, planning for it's still going to happen. And obviously we all want to get over there so bad. There's nothing more exciting than your first Europe tour. But yeah, look, watch this space.
That's it. I mean, it's just for all of us that live in Australia and, try to get overseas and play shows, just the planning involved and the logistics. And I mean, just putting aside not even considering the financial impacts and the investment that needs to be put in. I mean, that's another thing altogether. But just all that pre-planning and how far in advance you have to sort of look at these things. It's just it's such an additional challenge now, given what's going on. And I mean, I've spoken to other people about this before in the past, where it'd be fine if there was a guaranteed light at the end of the tunnel and you knew when that was coming, where you could just say, okay, well, we know by this date, this is when everything changes and we can get back to normal, and so you can plan towards that. But if that date or that time sort of moves, then we all move with it. And it's a really hard thing to lock in plans and get the logistics in place, make sure people are committed, and you know, for all of you in the band as well, you know, what we've just been talking about, everyone's got their lives, their careers, and you've got to sort of negotiate all those individual, you know, relationships that everybody has, and just hope that everything sort of falls into place. And
I know this has been like our life for the past like ever since we started talking with the touring company in Europe, and then all of a sudden all the stuff broke out. And yeah, look, it's been a really good experience for, you know, planning a tour and seeing, you know, in terms of the financial sort of costs of, you know, what it would take to get all of us over there, because, you know, Australia is this tiny little island away from everybody else. But yeah, look, it's been really good in terms of our experience for, you know, how to plan a tour. And, you know, given the pandemic, it's added a few little, you know, complications here and there. But yeah, all we can do, like, you know, we're just going to keep planning like it's going to happen, just so, you know, at the last minute, if things open up and we can go, we'll be like, yep, we're ready to go, because, you know, we're a business and we want to make sure that we do the best by our business. So we're going to make sure that, you know, we've got all of our ducks in a row, so to speak, just in case we can go. And if we can't, if something unforeseeable happens and we're not able to get over there, at least we know what we need to do for next time.
Perfect. I think, and I'm so glad you referred to your band as a business, and I genuinely mean that, because that's the biggest problem that most bands have, is that they shy away from admitting that, and that's where you separate that word we said before, hobby, from something that's legitimate. And
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It just everything becomes more serious. There's more commitment. And you start to look at things for the health of the group and the business. It's like any traditional business. You've got to have everything in place and some structure, and there's a lot of considerations that normally wouldn't be taking place if you had the mentality of it being sort of the stereotypical band that you know, weekend warriors get together and play a few shows and have a bit of fun. And
yeah, exactly. No, we're in this for the long haul. You know, we do treat this like a business, and we have, you know, weekly meetings. We make sure that we're on top of what we need to do. You know, and every member contributes equally to this business. And you know, it's more than just a hobby for all of us. You know, we really want to make something out of this, you know, living that, you know, it's not just a dream of living the rock star like lifestyle. We really, like, I don't know, we want to put on a show. We want to show people things that, you know, possibly haven't been done before. We want to try and, you know, do something a bit different. Not just, you know, as you said, the weekend warriors that just go in and, you know, every now and again we want to sort of, I don't know, we're in this for the long haul.
Love it. I love it. I kind of wish that the business thing popped up earlier in the conversation, because I'd be chewing your ear off for at least the next couple of hours for sure. That's
maybe part two.
Yeah, maybe part two. Absolutely. But yeah, I think the cool thing that I see with you guys and the band is that the band hasn't been around for a long time, but you've done so much in such a short space of time, and you're one of, I guess, well, it's a growing number of bands, but still one of few bands in Australia that are really taking it seriously. And as you said before, you guys are in it for the long haul, and you've got a long-term plan, and it's not just a case of just reacting to situations and going, oh, well, we'll just see what happens and just go with the flow. It's like, okay, well, let's have these weekly meetings. Let's put some structure in place. Let's work out what our goals are. Where do we want to go? What do we want to do? And
we have our business plan.
Oh, perfect.
We reassess the plan every year, just like a regular business would. We look at the strengths and the weaknesses and what needs to be fixed and goals, long-term, short-term,
God, wish we need more bands like this. It's fantastic. It's really good. And I think, I'm not sure, look, I'll be honest, I haven't paid attention to all of the sort of stuff that you guys have been putting out. But just like my sort of little request from my end or something to consider is I'd definitely be sharing a lot more of this sort of talk, over the long term with your audience, your supporters, your fans, and putting it out there. I think, even just as setting some standards out there, and not in a boasting sort of way with, to say, this is how we think bands should be acting. It's just a case of, I don't know, it's sort of unveiling the curtain a little bit with it's sort of like the identity thing, it's showing other aspects to the band and sort of seeing the mechanics.
Yeah, like that realism.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, lifting the bonnet to see how a band like your band ticks would be quite eye-opening, not just for a music fan that doesn't have any experience of being in a band, but I think other musicians will be, very quietly having a look going, that's interesting, and having a few light bulb moments as well. And so it can be a really good way to influence and sort of lead in different aspects. So that would be...
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for that. Yeah. That's definitely something that we'd love to do more of.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. And I mean, just, from another angle, one thing I see that you guys do really well is sort of that real interactive, sort of lighthearted sort of engagement that you have with everybody, where you'll have these sort of, these sort of streams. And I think there was one the other night or the other week where I think you guys were... What were you playing? Was it the
Lord of the Rings trivia?
Yes, that's what it was. And so, and I think you had a drinking game sort of associated with it as well. And so, it's gradually just sort of getting a little bit looser as the game went on.
Oh yeah, it definitely went to a whole other level.
and that stuff's cool. I mean, I think that stuff's awesome. It's just it's a case of not taking yourselves, obviously you take what you do seriously, but not taking yourselves seriously. And I think it's a nice blend to show different shades of the band. It's cool.
Oh yeah, we're a whole bunch of nerds. We love trivia. That was just so much fun. That was such a fun night. We were just like, what can we do? Like, we're sitting in isolation. We have this board game. Why don't we just do a live stream?
Why not? I mean, you're probably just going to drink and play games anyway, so you may as well get people to watch you.
Yeah, exactly what we were going to do.
I love it. Well, I'll chuck a bunch of links in for everybody to check out the band and direct them to. I think the last. Now you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but the last song or single you guys put out was "Legacy" last year. Yeah,
Legacy. It's actually my favorite song to play, and the video is a fantastic touring promo for Queensland, because we go to so many different places. We go all over, like Greater Brisbane, to film this video. It was so much fun. Third Eye Visuals filmed it for us, and he is amazing.
Perfect.
Ben is such a cool guy to work with.
Well, I'll chuck that in the show notes so people can check that out. Could be a good little tourism video for bands once the borders open back
100%.
Up. Cool.
Yeah, the Sandblow at Rainbow Beach. Just pick your day carefully, because we went there one time during gale force winds at sunrise, and just sand blasted in the face is just never a good time.
Makes a good story though.
Never try playing a whistle with like gale force winds coming at you.
Alrighty, if you want to reach out to Sophie and check out Valhalore, you can go to valhalore.com. You can search for Sophie on the socials, Instagram and Facebook. I believe if you search for Sophie Grace, you should be able to find her. Nonetheless, I will chuck in Sophie's social links, the band links, everything we discussed in the show notes over at andysocial.net and andydowling.net. And whatever the hell you're listening to this podcast through right now, you should be able to click in the description of this episode, click on the links, there's a bunch of clickable links in there, stab your fingers against the screen, click your mouse, smash your keyboard, whatever it takes, click through and say hello to Sophie and anybody who's been on the podcast over the past 5 years. We are getting closer to 250 freaking episodes of the Antisocial, and we're not slowing down. So make sure you reach out to these people, especially if you enjoy those chats. And I think for them who've been lucky enough to have their ear chewed off by yours truly, I think they'd be absolutely stoked to hear from the Antisocial crowd and sharing a bit of love. So there you go. Before we wrap it up, Patreon, of course, come and join me on Patreon. Patreon.com/Andy Dowling is it's the place to go to support this podcast. And look, to be honest, the way that's set up, it's a really easy way for you guys just to throw a couple of coin my way and just get behind the podcast and really back it. I'm really passionate about this podcast as a way to lift up a lot of my mates who play in bands in Australia, but also nestle them in with lots of weird and wonderful people and some bigger names as well to bring in new crowds, new people to listen to this podcast and help it grow. So the bigger the audience, the more benefits it's going to have for the guests and everybody who's listening to the podcast. So get behind it, help me out. Support starts from only $1 a month. I mean, you don't get anything apart from a feel-good, little warm and fuzzy feeling. But you can set it up, link it to your PayPal. You can do it to credit card, but I would recommend PayPal. Credit cards can be a bit scary. I don't want to encourage people to use their credit cards. So PayPal, set it up. It's nice and easy. You won't even notice it. There are additional tiers there if you want to get access to the exclusive Patreon podcast that comes out every Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. And it's just it's a fantastic way to just get behind it. I've got a lot of grand plans to expand this podcast, get more episodes out, maybe integrate video here and there. We'll see how that goes. And once we can get out of our little neighborhoods, then I'm going to start traveling again and getting more and more people in person and just doing a lot of fun stuff. And so this Patreon support goes a long way to funding those things. And most importantly, the monthly costs of hosting and editing and the gear, and I've got a really dodgy XLR cable at the moment, so I'm gonna have to replace that one. So all these like little things add up, and the Patreon support just takes a massive chunk of stress out of my life. So it's absolutely fantastic, and it just keeps me focused on just wanting to have great chats with people and not having to worry about being bogged down with the finances of the podcast, if you know what I mean. So a little thank you in particular to the people who have signed up to my social circle tier. It's my $10 tier. Fucking crazy. Like, these people are just willing to throw their money down and support me and this podcast. And it means a hell of a lot. They're significant contributors to the podcast. So a big thank you to Andrew from Perth, Mick G from Sydney, Ash from Deniliquin, Dan from Dapto. We've got Rod from Rayleigh in North Carolina, Saul from Oxford in the UK, Patrick from Canberra, Liam from Brisbane, Chris from Sydney, Brendo from Leeton. And we've also got Tim from Canberra and James from Brisbane. Thank you very much, folks. And thank you to everybody else who has signed up across all the other tiers on Patreon. It means a hell of a lot. And waffle. But that's it, folks. I'm umming and ahhing about who I release next week. I've got a few in the bag that have been recorded. And I'm wondering, do I keep on a bit of a streak of Australian musicians, or do I throw a different one in the mix and break it up a little bit? I don't know. Let's see. Let's narrow it down. It's either going to be a musician or a comedian. All right, let's leave it at that. Until next week, folks, thank you so much for listening. Take care and ta-ta.